Minister Ong Ee Kang.
Mr. Speaker, sir, today we debate an issue close to my heart. I will not just speak as a member of the House or a member of the front bench, but also as a son, a father, and a husband. At the core of this debate are the relationships that all of us have with women in our lives, at our workplaces, in our country. And our duty to women should be equal to our duties to all fellow citizens. And the choices open to women must be equal to those open to men. First, let me ask, what is the place of women in our lives? I'll share a bit of my own circumstances. My grandfather, my grandmother, they had 9 sons. I have no aunties, of whom my father was the second eldest. They live in a kampong in Lorong Chuan, now part of Aljunied GRC. I grew up watching the men in my family. They breed fishes, they plant vegetables, they rear livestock, they repair cars. There's a workshop in our kampong. And the women, they cook, they clean, they look after the children. There was men's work and there was women's work. Then when my grandfather fell gravely ill, I saw it was my aunties, that means my uncle's wives, particularly my who took care of him. Then when he died, and during the last rites, I could see the men and the women have distinct roles, and there were protocols during the last rites observed at the funeral. So from young, I felt some dissonance because I was in primary school then, and at that time in class, there was hardly any differentiation between men, boys, and girls. If anything, the girls were often the better students, while the boys are more playful and many of us are struggling to keep up. And school lessons at that time already included stories like Hua Mulan, like Marie Curie. And so, from a young age, we had both men and women as our role models. Then my parents moved into their own flat, and that is in Toa Payoh, next to the temple. That was 1970s. The household composition didn't change. I had an elder brother, so my mother, she was the outlier, the only woman in the family. But what changed was her role in the family. She was a teacher, which meant she had to go to school very early in the morning, came home, marked the papers, marked the exam papers, marked the homework, and then cook, clean, look after my brother and I, and also coach us on our homework. So in her, I saw a very strong woman, who in her world carved out a role for herself that's equal but different from my father. And to me, my brother, she was our disciplinarian, and she was also our anchor. Growing up, therefore, my family were mainly men, and women were the outliers. Then I got married, and then my wife and I, we've had our own children, and the situation changed completely. Both our children are girls. I became the outlier. So today, after my parents' passing, the people I love most in this world, all women. The dissonance I felt as a kid, I slowly developed into a deeper understanding of the struggles and aspirations of women. I'm not sure I totally get it, but I'm trying to get it. You see, as a young father, I had thought that whatever discrimination and biases there are against women, it's all right, my children will be all right, our daughters will be all right, because these will be eventually scrubbed out by the norms of a modern society. After all, in Singapore, our daughters have a good education. They are growing up in a world where women can be CEOs, can be professionals, can be leaders of nations. And as parents, we will support them to fulfill their ambition and their aspirations. But soon I realized is not so simple. And I saw it through the eyes of our daughters. You see, one example, our daughters were just toddlers. During Chinese New Year visits, you can see relatives will glance at them and then turn to my wife and ask, when you having sons? My wife will always reply, I'm happy with 2 daughters. And I know our daughters heard those conversations. I wonder how they felt. Yeah. Then as a young girl, my elder one, when she first learned of the concept of dowries, she had a shock. That was over a dinner table. I don't know how it came up. And she started asking, why must the groom's family give the dowry? We are talking in terms of Chinese tradition. Why the 4 pieces of gold for Teochews? Why the roast pig for Cantonese and Hakkas? And she had all these questions, burning questions. So my wife calmly answered. She said, because in Chinese tradition, the girl married out now. So that got her even more upset. So she said, so this is like a transaction. I got sold. I will be sold. So I tried to make things better by explaining actually the money can flow both ways. And in some cultures, it is the bride side that provides the dowry, because in recognition that the husband will incur costs in taking care of the bride. It wasn't a helpful intervention. I would say if it is a SQ, it's a very badly answered SQ. We left it like that. All children, sons and daughters, are born into this world with no bias against men or women, like our own daughters. But through my daughter's eyes, during their formative years, I better understood the lived experience of social expectations and prejudices. And these are beyond government policies and legislation. In fact, policies and legislation, especially those in Singapore, are meant to remove discrimination and promote equality. Instead, we have biases deeply embedded in our social practices and our constructs. I think they probably have their roots in nomadic bands, where the men mainly hunted, the women mainly gathered. And then these roots probably grew deeper in agrarian tribes, where the men mainly plowed the field and the women mainly took care of domestic matters. And then the tribes decided to come together to form complex societies. And then the key problem statement was, how do we as tribes, different tribes, live peacefully together and not kill each other? The answer is to make everyone stakeholders of a stable and peaceful society. And that stake is the betterment of the family, of whom members are bonded by blood and DNA. And it follows, therefore, that bloodlines must be drawn to define the family. And the basis to do so in most societies was the patriarchal structure. So therefore, the expectations of sons carrying the family line, daughters marrying out, dowries flowing whichever way, sons having greater share of inheritance often, protected and reinforced the system. We cannot undo all these long-standing anthropological practices and history in one generation. But no matter how entrenched, that past is challenged by the present. And I think there are at least 3 driving forces. Number 1, education. Number 2, technology. And they combine in a powerful way to force a rethink of the status quo. Take education, for example. Young girls in Singapore, they grow up in an environment that their grandmothers would not have imagined when they were children. Education has become the great equalizer of most societies. With equal opportunities for education and development, women are now able to enter vocations and professions that were historically male-dominated. And education as a driving force is now turbocharged by the advancement of technology. What used to require physical strength can now be automated or done by machines. So neither men nor women are better at numerical calculation, more emphatic, or more meticulous. It is individuals that have varied strengths and weaknesses. I was transport minister before. During that time, I met many women engineers working in LTA, in SMRT, in SBST. When I was education minister, I met many male students training to be nurses. Then now as health minister, I saw many of them serving in hospitals. In my GRC, we have two successful women. One, Mariam Jaffa, who was trained as an engineer. Two, Polisan, she was a Super Puma helicopter pilot. The lines that were once perceived between male and female-dominated occupations are blurring, and the overlap, I believe, will enlarge over time. Now, let me talk about the third driving force, and that is challenging the past, and that is our own effort to change the status quo. The patriarchal structure will evolve faster if people now conclude that as a society, if we treat men and women more equally, it is better for the welfare of our families and our loved ones. This will take time. Government will have a key role. By enacting policies such as universal access to education, Women's Charter, and all the various recommendations in the white paper before the House today, we can catalyze and help accelerate into that new future. Society must also play a part. That means you and I, everybody, every family. I look after a constituency, many BTO units, many young couples moved into them, and I can see many husbands are now significantly involved in household and child-minding responsibilities. Some families even have a breadwinning mother and a stay-home father, because this is the best play of the family's strength, unheard of in my growing up years. Then employers can decide, without the compulsion of law, that it makes better business sense to get rid of gender bias in hiring, in promotion, appointment to boards, and succession planning. Having said that, the push for greater equality between women and men, it is a nuanced and long-term exercise. I have highlighted the existence of social or societal biasness that we need to correct. But at the other end of the spectrum, there are inherent differences between women and men that cannot be ignored, and should in fact continue to exist. That's what I believe. Let me quote Mother Teresa in a message for the World Conference on Women in 1995. Quote, "I do not understand why some people are saying that women and men are exactly the same and are denying the beautiful differences between men and women. As I often say to people who tell me that they would like to serve the poor as I do, and Mother Teresa would tell them, what I can do, you cannot. What you can do, I cannot. But together we can do something beautiful for God. And it is just the way the differences between women and men." Unquote. Many women I know, including my wife, are against gender biasness in society, but they will also fiercely guard the difference between women and men, because they know daughters have a special bond with their parents that is different from the relationships that sons have. A woman in a room full of men is often able to articulate a different perspective. Then for mothers, maternal instincts, non-substitutable. It comes from carrying the child for 9 months, manifests in the mother wanting to nurse the child after birth. Let me offer another quote. This is by a Hollywood star, Denzel Washington. He was paying a tribute to his late mother in one of the talk shows, I think. And he said this, I quote, "A mother is a son's first true love when he's born. A son is a mother's last true love when she dies. Last 3 words I added. Single or married, mothers or women without children, women have special roles to play in their families and society because of these differences between women and men. However, where does recognizing inherent differences stop and biasness and stereotypes begin? It is a very difficult and sensitive question, which I have no answer to. But during this debate, we hear many examples, many suggestions. How about enhancing this scheme, that scheme? But let's look at the broader philosophical question in mind. We want to get rid of biasness, but there are also inherent differences between women and men, beautiful differences. So look at leave. We only cater for maternity leave in our Employment Act. That was decades ago. And that was a world where women need to recuperate after childbirth, and childminding and taking care of the infant mostly performed by the women. So maternity leave goes to the women. Then, I think, early 2000, we introduced child leave, infant care leave, as we see that men are performing more of such roles. Then 2013, I believe, introduced 1 week of paternity leave. Then as you see more men participating, we introduced a second week, 2017. Now, 2022, should we therefore declare all that as family leave to be equally shared between men and women? Is it equality, or are we no longer recognizing there is still a difference between men and women? So be wise when we make such suggestions and make such choices. The recommendations in the white paper are careful in recognizing and striking this balance, championing equality, especially of opportunities and progression, but yet recognizing the beautiful differences between women and men. It is a wiser approach. There are many practical initiatives, anti-discriminatory measures in the workplace, FWAs, stronger support for caregivers, allowing elective egg freezing, upholding stiffer penalties for sexual offenses. And of particular importance are the moves to strengthen the family support infrastructure, which are empowering for women at various stages of their lives. On this, let's also have some perspective. It is not difficult to ask for more. This subsidy, HCG, for example, 400 not enough, increase from 200 to 400 not enough, let's increase some more, give to more people. But I think from a technical perspective, the home care grant is a broad-based, it's not universal, but it's broad-based. No doubt if you transfer someone from a nursing home to a home care environment, government save a lot of subsidies. And we can think about how to help such individuals and such families more. But when you implement a home care grant, it doesn't cater to just this group. It's actually quite broad-based. Whoever meet the means-tested criteria is eligible. So it is not cheap. It's quite a big scheme. And if you want to expand it, double it, expand the number of recipients, you are looking at more budgets. So where the budgets come from, you've got to come from some taxes. And if you cannot raise taxes, you object to raising taxes, then where's the money coming from, right? So we will continue to find ways to support families. Yeah? From housing to education to generally having a safe, peaceful environment to bring up children, and also for home care. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've been speaking as a son, father, and husband. Now let me speak as a man to fellow men. I say, let us all be stakeholders in a fair and equal society. At the most basic level, let us respect women through our words and action. Offenses against women are clearly wrong, and the vast majority of us agree with it. Perhaps what is less obvious is the occasional insensitive remark that reflects an unconscious bias or stereotype. Understand and see things from a woman's point of view. Stop mansplaining, using diminutives, or doing things in the presence of women that they feel embarrassed by. Let us be more proactive in supporting the women in our lives, just as they support us. This could mean undertaking the roles that society often expects women to do, like household chores, parenting, arranging for food during a gathering or conference or parliament sitting. Many men already do these things, and we can certainly do more as equal partners in society and in solidarity with women. Finally, while we accord women respect, let us take a step further to be chivalrous. I may be old-fashioned, but I personally think there is much virtue in men extending a special courtesy to women. To be honest, I often feel uneasy just because I'm a minister. People, including my female staff, will attempt to carry my bag or open the door for me. And I will always try to stop them and offer to open the door for them instead, and often reminding them etiquette comes before protocol. Such courtesy is timeless. It does not lessen the person at the receiving end or imply that they cannot do it themselves. They are perfectly capable of doing it themselves. Instead, it adds a certain appreciation and complementarity to the relationship between women and men. I want to make a special shout out to our youths, having met many of them during my time as Minister for Education. I say to them, be kind to all your friends. Accord respect and courtesy to one another. Listen to the views of everyone, girls and boys. Keep the games and the jokes appropriate and tasteful, not from your point of view, but from others. Sexual offenses are a rising problem amongst your generation. The boys might be uncomfortable hearing this, but I think it's important you hear this. Never be part of the problem, but be part of the solution. When in doubt, always do the right thing. Watch out for the girls, and if it's late at night, offer to walk them to the bus stop, to the MRT station, or to their destinations. Most of you take Wi-Fis now, but on those rare occasions when you have to take a photo with your class, your CCA group, or with the minister, do not let the girls kneel in front and you stand at the back comfortably. So boys, volunteer to squat in front, or at least position yourself freely as equals. SMM restrictions are now lifted. You can now take group photos again without 1 meter spacing. So make this the new post-COVID norm. Mr. Speaker, sir, to end the speech, let me talk about a familiar character in Chinese history, which is Hua Mulan. Members are familiar with the story. A poem was written about her called The Ballad of Mulan, Mulan Ci. I thought the last few lines are particularly meaningful. In Chinese, it goes like this. 雄兔脚扑朔，雌兔眼迷离，两兔旁地走，安能辨我是雄雌? Roughly translated, it means if you catch hold of a rabbit, the male will kick its legs. If you catch hold of a female rabbit, it will close its eyes. But when they run side by side, you cannot tell which is male and which is female. And this was written in 400 AD, during the era of Northern Wei, Nanbei Cao. Even in highly patriarchal ancient China, there was recognition that there are inherent differences between men and women, but there are many roles that can be equally performed by both women and men. As our daughters grew up and start their own families, they will likely face the same dilemma as many women today, juggling multiple responsibilities and feeling guilty if they fall short of being the superwoman that handle it all. But if my daughter decide that as a life priority to start a family, spend more time as mothers to bring up their children, even at the expense of their career progression, I will be immensely proud of them. And if they decide they prefer to be single and use their talents to contribute to community and society, I will also be immensely proud of them. But whichever priority they put greater weight on, whatever life course they choose, they should not be pressured to do so. This shall be their choice. As a son, father, husband, member of this house, I see our collective duty to support women in whatever they set out to do and accelerate away from our antiquated past of women and men stereotypes, at home, at work, in society. The future that we envision must be a society that dispels unconscious bias, promotes the right value of mutual respect between all individuals, upholds meritocracy, and provides as much support as we can to enable caregivers to find better balance in their roles. In my mind, this equality to freedom of choice is the heart of this white paper, and the reason why I strongly support it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.